Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our webinar. We'll start in a couple minutes, wait for a couple more people to join, but first, could someone enter in the Q&A box and just let me know that you can hear me? Could someone click on the Q&A drop down and just type and just let me know that you can hear me?
Hey Ava, it's Kevin here. We've got about 6 people online and I can hear your audio okay. And we're just looking for confirmation from our participants tonight. So if one of our participants doesn't mind opening up the Q&A panel on your WebEx control panel, you should be able to see that at the 3 dots at the very bottom of the screen, and you should find the Q&A box. If one of our participants could please open up the Q&A and just type in, yes, you can hear us, that'll give us some confidence that our audio is coming through crystal clear tonight. Hey, Chris, thanks, mate. Appreciate it. It's always difficult doing these webinars when you don't hear from your participants. So it looks like everything's working fine, Ava.
Okay, that's great. Now to you, Nick, to introduce us.
Well, thank you, Ava. Greetings and welcome to the webinar. My name is Mike Dowd and I am the Director of the Department of Environmental Quality's Air and Renewable Energy Division. I'd like to welcome you all to the statewide virtual outreach and listening session. The purpose of this webinar is to describe the process and schedule that DEQ will use to develop a long-term statewide comprehensive climate action plan, or CCAP, and to get your input and feedback on what should be included in the plan to develop potential pathways to reduce climate pollution. This plan is being developed under a planning grant that was awarded to DEQ from the US EPA under the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, or CPRG. Since the award of this grant, the DEQ CPRG team has been busy developing the various deliverables of the grant. Our accomplishments to date include the development of a short-term priority climate action plan, or PCAP, and applying for and securing 2 mitigation project implementation grants from EPA that will bring almost $200 million to the Commonwealth. As we move into the CCAP development phase, DEQ is seeking input from a wide range of interested parties, including the public, major stakeholders, state agencies, and other groups on both the process and content of the plan. To this end, the DEQ is holding a series of regional community events throughout Virginia. The webinar today is for a statewide audience that may not be able to attend these regional meetings. Thank you again for being here. We look forward to hearing your thoughts on both the process and plan to identify possible ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now I'll pass the discussion over to Allison France to provide details on the CCAP planning process. Allison?
Hello, all. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you, Mike, for the introduction. My name is Allison Brands. I'm an air quality planner with DEQ, and I'll be leading us through a little bit of an intro of what we'll be covering tonight. So in terms of today's agenda, or tonight's agenda, I should say, we're going to be going over a quick video for you to just get us started, and then cover some of our meeting goals. And then we'll cover a review of the Priority Climate Action Plan, or the first phase in DEQ's climate planning process, before we move into the bulk of our content tonight, the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan overview, and what that consists of, and some of the discussion around the emission reduction strategies within the CCAP. And then we'll move into a community discussion where you'll be able to share some input through some discussion questions. And then we'll wrap up with some relevant materials to leave you all with tonight. So for all of us online, our WebEx attendees, thank you for joining. These are some functions that you'll be using tonight. So the Q&A is our most popular one that you'll be using. So some of you have already practiced that by letting us know that you can hear us, but that is also where you will be putting all of your questions and comments throughout the night. We'll be monitoring that and replying to as many as we can. And if you have any audio troubles or anything like that, please let us know. I will also mention that if you are having audio trouble, it could be on our end, but also if you want to explore your different speaker options, you can always go to the unmute bar at the very bottom and look at that down drop arrow and explore the different speakers to make sure that your audio is working properly. We'll also be using the chat function throughout the night. So this is one-way communication from us to you. This is where we'll be sharing relevant links throughout the night, handouts, PDFs, things like that. So just be sure to be mindful of that and keep an eye out for what we post there. And as always, please let us know if you have any questions. We will have designated Q&A portions of the presentation tonight, but we will be trying to answer, and we'll see all of your questions as they come in. So if you have something relevant on that side, please do not hesitate to put that in, and we'll do our best to answer. And then now we'll get started with a short little video.
Virginia has a clear and vested interest in cleaner air for all, reliable and affordable clean energy, and improved resilience from increased storms, floods, and a changing climate. The Virginia Department of Environmental Quality is taking steps to meet these challenges through a climate pollution reduction grant from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. This grant consists of two parts: climate action plan and implementation projects. In March 2024, DEQ released the Virginia Priority Climate Action Plan. This plan identified innovative and high-impact projects to reduce greenhouse gas emissions over 5 years. DEQ based the plan on the 2020 greenhouse gas inventory and input from Virginia communities, stakeholders, and the public. Now, as part of the second part in this process, DEQ will build off the shorter-term plan by developing a comprehensive climate action plan. This is a longer-term statewide plan that will identify and evaluate potential actions to further reduce greenhouse gas emissions over 25 years. This plan will also look at existing goals and requirements for reducing climate pollution. In July 2024, the EPA awarded Virginia almost $200 million worth of funding for projects to reduce methane emissions and enhance Virginia's natural habitat. Now you may ask, how does this impact me? Cleaner air is good for everyone. Reducing extreme climate impacts such as floods and storms also helps us have a better overall quality of life. Now, DEQ wants to hear from you. DEQ wants to understand how your community goals might align with efforts to reduce climate pollution by 2050. There are many sectors to consider when addressing climate pollution. Let us look at each one. Transportation, industry, electric power, buildings, waste and wastewater, agriculture, and forestry and natural lands. So, what are the climate pollution challenges in your community? And how can that information be used to develop solutions to help your community and communities across Virginia? You can share your thoughts on reducing climate pollution in Virginia through the updated DEQ survey. Scan the QR code or visit the link to provide your input today. For more information on the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant and to view any upcoming events, visit deq.virginia.gov/CPRG or email our team at cprg@deq.virginia.gov. Let's work together to protect and improve air quality for the well-being of all Virginians.
hopefully that gave you a bit of an overview of what we're doing and why we're here.
Virginia,
Again. Before we begin with our bulk of our content tonight, we just wanted to get a little bit of a feeler. So we have a fun poll for you all tonight. We're asking, have you heard of or engaged in DEQ's climate planning process through the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant before? To answer this question, feel free, if you have your phone on you, to scan that QR code and you'll be able to go into the poll and answer this question. Or you can join at slido.com and then enter into the number of our poll tonight. And then feel free to just share whether you've engaged with us before. Maybe this is your very first time learning about CPRG. Maybe you're somewhat familiar, but you have not attended any meetings or webinars before. Or maybe you are very, very familiar and have maybe attended one or more of our meetings, webinars, or other communication channels. Roll in for a second. Looks like we have people who are somewhat familiar. Thank you so much. If this is your first time joining one of our webinars, thank you so much for being here. It's just one more minute. We'll be using this tool once more throughout the night, so feel free to keep it open. We'll circle back to it at a later time as well. Wonderful. Well, this is great. This is just fun for us to figure out where everybody is and how they're meeting us tonight. If this is your very first time learning about us and our engagements, then thank you so much for joining. And if you are a long-time engager of CPRG, thank you so much for coming back and learning more. In terms of our meeting goals for tonight, ultimately we are here tonight because we want to gain local feedback on potential climate actions to be included in the development of Virginia's Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, or CCAP. So your input will be used by us to help identify various community goals, challenges, opportunities, benefits, disbenefits of potential climate actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This is what we'll be talking about a lot tonight. Or climate pollution reduction strategies is another term. But this will all be considered alongside various streams of input, which we'll cover a little bit more in a bit. We are receiving this input, public input, alongside stakeholder input from agencies, various groups. And so we'll be considering all of this holistically when we develop our long-term climate action plan. And when we talk about climate action, why does it matter and why does it even matter to you? You might already know some of those answers, or some of these might be relevant to you if you're already here and joining us talking about this tonight. But just in case, we'll cover some of these and why climate action is really beneficial to communities and local community members. So when we talk about climate action, we often talk about protecting and restoring natural resources, so maybe expanding green spaces or planting more trees. Improving public health and local air quality, local air pollution is always a big one. And then there's also economic benefits when we talk about increasing the energy efficiency in residential and commercial buildings and seeing some financial benefits from that as well, lowering your energy costs. Also, economic benefits from expanded workforce development opportunities, expanding the clean energy workforce and sustainably transitioning that way for Virginia. We also often see transportation talked a lot about when we talk about climate action and climate pollution reduction strategies. So increasing mobility and public transit options like buses and trains. And then often when we talk about climate change, I think one of the first things that often comes to mind is reducing those risks from extreme weather. We see that a lot across the Commonwealth, increased flooding in our coastal zones, also increased heat as well, and mitigating those impacts. Without further ado, I will pass it over to our greenhouse gas inventory specialist, April Bain, to cover our priority climate action. Good evening, everyone, and thank you again so much for joining us. And thank you for introducing me, Allison. My name is Ava Bain, and I've been on DEQ's CPRG team for a year and a half now as our greenhouse gas inventory specialist. I will be sharing an overview of DEQ's Priority Climate Action Plan, or PCAP, to set the stage for Julia's discussion on the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, or CCAP. I will also be presenting a draft of DEQ's greenhouse gas inventory that is the basis for the CCAP. During the PCAP, we engaged Virginia residents through various platforms, both online and in person. We developed a PCAP survey similar to our current CCAP survey, and we received 322 responses from 171 unique zip codes in the Commonwealth. From all the valuable feedback we received, several climate action priorities emerged. Virginians expressed strong desire for increased use of renewable energy sources in their communities, more green spaces to enhance local environments, and improve public transit options for easier mobility. The respondents highlighted the most important benefits from these climate actions to be better air quality, improved transportation, and enhanced community resilience. Participants noted the significant barriers that prevent them from taking personal actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, including high costs of energy efficient alternatives and limited access to transit alternatives. And finally, respondents felt the greatest opportunities for overcoming barriers lie in government incentives and policies, and last but not least, community unity. In the PCAP, we developed 10 priority measures aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I'll give an example of some of these measures by sector. For the transportation sector, vehicle electrification and use of low carbon fuels. For buildings, energy efficiency improvements in homes, businesses, and institutions. For industry, use of low carbon materials and industrial processes. For the electric power sector, use of low emitting and reliable power sources. For natural and working lands, protection and restoration of forests, agricultural lands, wetlands, and other high carbon landscapes. And lastly, for the wastewater sector, capturing methane emissions from landfills and water treating plants. Now, time to discuss the greenhouse gas inventory. This is Virginia's 2021 comprehensive greenhouse gas inventory. Inventories are crucial for any air quality plan because they provide this baseline understanding of our current emissions. Virginia's greenhouse gas inventories are developed using EPA's state inventory tool, and it encompasses all sectors and all greenhouse gases, which includes carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases. But for the sake of simplicity, all the numbers up here are in terms of million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. In 2021, Virginia emitted approximately 146 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Some key takeaways are transportation is obviously the largest emitting sector in Virginia, accounting for over a third of all greenhouse gas emissions, with personal vehicles actually being responsible for over half of these transportation emissions. Electric power is the second most emitting sector in Virginia, which includes emissions from electricity generation at power plants. And industry is the third most emitting sector in Virginia, which reflects Virginia's industry-heavy landscape. Another very important sector to address is the forestry and land use sector, due to the sector's carbon sequestration capabilities. In Virginia, forests, grasslands, wetlands, urban trees, and other natural lands capture over a third of our emissions. This really emphasizes the need for Virginia to preserve our natural resources while also addressing the anthropogenic or human-caused emissions. And this is a graph that shows Virginia's greenhouse gas emission trends from 2005 through 2021 and preliminary emission projections from 2022 to 2050. Since 2005 up until 2021,
net greenhouse gas emissions, which includes both greenhouse gas emissions and the carbon sinks, the greenhouse gas sinks. These net emissions have decreased 26%. And this decrease is largely due to fuel shifting in the electric power sector. But all of the sectors actually decrease besides the forestry and land use sector. Again, these projections are just preliminary estimates of Virginia's greenhouse gas emissions. This is under a business as usual scenario. So if all external factors such as population, economics, policies, regulations were to continue as they are right now. As part of the CCAP deliverable, DEQ and our contractors are modeling Virginia-specific emissions projections by policies and by sector to predict future emissions under various scenarios. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. So please type any questions or comments in the box and I can answer them. Okay. Questions yet? Okay, and throughout the presentation, you'll have time to ask questions. So for now, I'll pass it off to Julia to discuss our comprehensive climate action plan work.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Ava mentioned, my name is Julia Wack, and I am the Administrative Data Coordinator for the CPRG program. Very happy to have everyone here tonight. So Ava really set the stage for this next portion of the presentation. Really, Virginia built the Priority Climate Action Plan looking at a 5-year roadmap to decrease greenhouse gas emissions. And now we're starting our work on the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. So looking to a 25-year time span through 2050, how can we identify certain measures to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions? So if you look in one of the handouts that was submitted at the beginning of the presentation, you should be able to see a more comprehensive list of the differences between the priority plan versus the comprehensive plan and what exactly is required by the Environmental Protection Agency for us to submit. But just to give a brief overview, really our emissions inventory is the baseline for the work that we'll be identifying in the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. This inventory allows us to build out future projections, and as Ava mentioned, we're in the process of identifying a Virginia-specific quote-unquote business as usual scenario in which some of these measures that we will be identifying aren't taken, and we're using those projections to also set reduction targets. So what goals do we want in Virginia, and what modes of input are we going to be using to identify those reduction targets? And in addition, what physical strategies can we look at implementing to get us there? There might be multiple roadmaps and multiple methods for us to get there, but really just identifying what a combination of actions would look like in multiple scenarios, and a scenario where there's high action taken at earlier on in the process versus later on, and identifying which sectors would have which types of impacts when looking at changes through 2050. We'll also be identifying potential funding opportunities that could be leveraged in order to make some of these measures more feasible, and what partnerships would be necessary in order to make them happen. A main difference between the comprehensive plan and the priority plan is a deeper analysis. So looking at air quality beyond just greenhouse gases, what other benefits are we going to see? Are we going to see improvements in ozone and particulate matter and other pollutants? And really just identifying how that's going to impact air quality more generally. There will also be a workforce analysis. So Allison briefly mentioned this, but identifying what barriers there are for the clean energy workforce to develop in Virginia, and what would be necessary in order to overcome those barriers. What type of projections do we see in the coming years in the clean energy space, and what partnerships, yet again, can be used to make these transitions more feasible and more seamless. As well as identifying more general community impacts. So there's a lot of moving pieces that go into this plan. And so basically in order for us to hear from everyone and make a representative plan, this is just a graphic that kind of demonstrates the different modes of input that DEQ will be using throughout the planning phase. So right now we're hosting a virtual community listening session. We also have been hosting in-person sessions. So traveling across the state to create forums where we're just informing the public of this climate planning effort and getting their feedback on what they would like to see in their plan, identifying what they see in their community or what they would like to see in their community and how that could potentially be implemented at a state level. So there are multiple methods in which we're getting feedback from the public. We have those in-person sessions, virtual sessions, in addition to always accepting written comment via email. We also have a survey that was briefly mentioned earlier in the video, and we will be using that input to identify where exactly we're hearing from across the state of Virginia, what localities are represented. That'll really just help us within our engagement process kind of reshuffle some of our efforts and make sure that we're reaching all parts of the state. We're also conducting a formalized stakeholder group. So basically these organizations that are involved represent different economic sectors across the state of Virginia. So for example, various utilities, as well as different environmental organizations, agricultural organizations, planning organizations, waste related as well. So any sector that would really be involved in some of these measures, just making sure that we have representation from them, and we're using that to build the plan. And in addition to all the other modes of input, we also have a list published on our website if you're ever curious which organizations are represented. If you go to our CPRG webpage, we do have a little section at the bottom that's kind of expandable, and you just click on CCAP Stakeholder Group, and then we have our list of key organizations posted there in case you're curious. DEQ is also conducting work with state agencies. So an interagency working group with different organizations across the state. So for example, the Department of Health, the Department of Wildlife Resources, Conservation and Recreation. What other state organizations are going to want to be looped into this climate planning work? And how will that process of engagement with them help us realize what partnerships could potentially be leveraged in order to make some of these plans actionable? So we're also working with localities, regional groups, and tribes. So there are also 3 regional groups within the state that have received planning grants. We have Plan RDA, which is working in the Richmond area, Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, which is working closer to the Eastern Shore area. We also have the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments up in Northern Virginia conducting climate work. So staying in constant coordination with them, understanding their boots on the ground work with communities and using that to better inform our work at the state level. Within tribal engagement, the Monacan Indian Nation also received a planning grant. So staying in communication with them, but also looking to other state and federally recognized tribes to ask for their inputs in the final plan that will be submitted to EPA. EPA also has a big focus on low income and disadvantaged communities with this CPRG program. So identifying what areas across the state are facing undue climate burdens and environmental harms, and making sure that the voices of those communities are amplified within our final plan. So that was a lot of information. So to kind of give you a little bit more of a concrete timeline. So the priority plan was submitted earlier in 2024, and then in October of 2024, we began our comprehensive climate planning efforts. So we had some kickoff webinars just to inform members of the public and any other interested parties of this climate planning effort. And from November through December, we also began our formal stakeholder engagement process, which has continued into, it will be done with our stakeholder group engagement in March. That is still ongoing. We're also hosting these community listening sessions, and we greatly appreciate your time and your input and your contribution to our engagement process that we're gonna be carrying out through the end of spring. As I mentioned, we're gonna make sure that we're staying in constant coordination with those regional groups that did receive planning grants. In addition, we'll be conducting our interagency working group very shortly, and we will be kicking that off. We'll also be conducting LIDAC engagement. So to elaborate a little bit on what that's going to look like, I mentioned some of those in-person sessions across the state. These are being hosted at each of our regional offices, but beyond where our regional offices are located, what areas in the state are kind of missing that engagement, and where can we fill in those gaps and make sure that low income and disadvantaged communities and just harder to reach communities are able to have accessible opportunities to give their input on the plan. As well as we will be conducting formal tribal engagement later this spring. So that's gonna basically be our first round of engagement. And then in the summertime, we're going to be drafting the comprehensive plan. And then we will come back once we have a draft version of that plan to present. So that will be open for public comment and review. And we will be conducting another round of just receiving feedback and input on what you would like to see, what you like, what you don't like. And then DEQ will take all of that feedback and we will review it and implement any revisions that we need to and submit the finalized version of the plan to EPA in December 2025. So lots of different voices are going to be involved in this plan, lots of moving pieces. I briefly kind of went over some of the differences between the comprehensive plan and the priority plan, both the timeline and the components of the plan, some of the resources identified in those plans. So if you have any questions about the priority plan, the comprehensive plan, or the engagement timeline, please just feel free to drop any of those questions in the Q&A, and we will read those aloud as they come in and do our best to answer your questions.
We do have a quick question. Could you provide a link to the community survey? So yes, we will drop that in the chat for you.
Okay. Questions. But as we mentioned, there's always an opportunity for you to just have time to drop any questions as they come up in the Q&A portion. But seeing as I'm not seeing anything currently, I'm gonna go ahead and pass this presentation back off to Allison, and she'll be conducting some of our discussion portion of the webinar.
Julia, we do have one more question that I checked off in here, so I'll read these out before we move into our fun little polls. I'll go back for just a second. We have questions. Let's see here. When you're done with this plan, will there be time to implement it before the next plan is started? So there are no plans to have a secondary plan like after this one. So this will be up until 2050. So it'll hopefully cover at least that time frame, but we will be doing interim reporting on updates for the plan, so progress reports, and that'll be completed as well. And then after that time frame is up, so we have 3 years, I believe, when we are going to be doing those progress reports. After that, we will evaluate a need for updating the inventory, which that will be done annually, so we can look at progress there, and then evaluate additional need for expanding or redeveloping programs from that point. Let's see here. The next question is, what level of detail are you seeking for specific projects? That's a good question. So we are looking for any level of detail that you're eager and willing to provide tonight. So we are looking to identify various community benefits and opportunities and challenges. So we'll go into some of that with our Q&A or discussion portion, which will be in just 1 second. So we are looking for specific projects that you might need or have already in place in your community, or maybe specific projects that you would like to see happen, or if there are just general maybe concepts that you're concerned about, maybe you just in general have a need or desire to see expanded public transit options, or maybe you're concerned about something like data centers. Any of that larger input is really helpful, but then also we're looking to identify those various community-specific needs as well. We don't, candidly speaking, have able to implement or fund every single project that is identified, but this will be used and disseminated if we're not the right person to facilitate that, how we can share that information to localities and communities to better support them in addressing their climate needs and concerns. We also have a question here. Do you anticipate your award being affected by the recent activity at the federal level related to federal funds? Which is a very good question. I will defer to Mike Dow to answer that question for us really quickly. As you're
Sure. I won't go on camera for this. Move around too much. Never know what the future holds. What I can tell you is that our portals remain open to draw down funds. We continue to meet with EPA. We have a meeting with our EPA grants people on Friday. And we are guardedly optimistic that the funding will not be cut off, that we can continue. We've taken an attitude, going forward with this. And so far, there's been a bit of uncertainty, but there seems to have been a little bit of greater certainty provided in the last week or so. So as I say, we're guardedly optimistic that we will continue and that the funds will continue for these projects.
I think that answers both of those questions as well. But yes, we're moving forward as optimistic as we can, and we'll inform as we move along if anything changes. Thanks so much for your questions. Awesome. All right, keep sending in questions as you please, and we will continue to monitor those. All right, so I told you we'd be back with a poll, so here we are. If you want to hop back in, scanning that QR code or inserting in that link, slider.com and putting in that number. I'll leave this up for just a minute or two. This is going to be our introductory question as we move into more of our discussion-based section of tonight's presentation. But we're really curious to kick off this conversation, which sectors, for example, agriculture or transportation, are most important to you when reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So we have a couple of different sectors here. If you need more information on the different sectors, please reference the handout link that was sent out, and that has a description of all of the different sectors, what they sort of entail, and what sort of emission reduction strategies could look like within each sector. So you're actually able to rank these. So if you want to move your widget sort of up and down, put agriculture at the top and transportation at the bottom, you can do so. So feel free to play with this for just a second. We'll wait as you input in your comments here. This is going to help us identify what those various sector needs and concerns are. Definitely see transportation at the top right now. That makes sense, given that that's our largest emitting sector within our inventory, and then electric power. This is actually very similar to what we had with power. New presentation for you to do similar webinar for you. So. And this will be open as well, so if you want to come back to this at a later time, you can also always put your comments priorities in the Q&A if that's easier for you, and we'll continue to see this as well. That's just a fun little visualization of what we're looking at here. Shifting as more people come in. Thank you so much for engaging with us this way. I will mention that DEQ is trying to explore different technology forms as we engage with community members. So thank you for being patient with us as we navigate new technology to make these more fun and entertaining for you today. Looks like right here, what we have is transportation, electric power, commercial buildings, residential buildings, industry, wastewater, and agriculture, which makes a lot of sense. I think for the most part, it's very interesting to see. And then we also have forestry and natural lands right at the bottom there. Okay, wonderful. Well, we won't spend too much longer on this. Thank you for sharing your input. But now we'll move on to more discussion questions for you. All right, so this is our second discussion question. This is what we're really hoping to seek input on tonight. We're asking what specific actions are you already taking to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or might already be happening in your community? So for example, maybe you live in a community that is relatively walkable or even bikeable, and you are able to do a daily commute that way. That's what I do actually. I live in the Richmond area and I'm able to walk or bus to work each day, which helps to lower my emissions from personal vehicle use. Or maybe you like to donate or purchase secondhand as much as possible to reduce waste, consumer waste. And then also on the topic of waste, maybe you are engaging and have the opportunity to access recycling programs, maybe even composting if that's an option for you, that's accessible for you. So feel free to drop in Q&A what some of these actions look like for you, what you try to engage in your daily life that maybe make a difference for you, or maybe something that's happening in your community. Tree planting activities, volunteer events, things like that. So we'll give this as these comments roll in. Yeah, we see a need for composting and expanded composting systems as well. Lots of countries do have ways to have shown successful ways to increase composting and recycling initiatives. If you want to put your question directly in the Q&A, we can monitor the chat that way. So feel free to just drop them in one at a time or all at once. Feel free to just put that in your Q&A and we'll read those out loud and try to respond to those as best we can. I know that we saw earlier another need for expanded food scrap recycling programs. Also a big need for communities and not always an accessible option depending on where you are. Feel free to keep putting those in. This is going to be sort of our preliminary discussion. So we have a couple more for you tonight. This is going to be the second stage. So if there's no time to think about it, this conversation or this question will really frame our future ones. So it might all tie back in together for you as we continue to discuss climate pollution reduction strategies. So for now, it looks like have a few people coming in here. So we do have some engagements with community groups such as the Environmental Committee with the, I hope I pronounced this right, is it the Kiwanis Club? I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, correct me, but focused on electric vehicle charger infrastructure and electric vehicle lower cost of ownership, which is great. Yes, you see electric vehicles becoming increasingly popular, not just in Virginia, that's just a general trend nationwide. But with that comes the responsibility and need for expanded charging infrastructure. So advocating for that is always, or even advocating for any environmental concern that you have, it's always a really great way to get involved if some personal actions are not always available to you. Awesome. Okay, well, let us move on here to question number 3. Thank you all for those comments. Oh, we also have one more. Thank you so much. Home is supposed to be very energy efficient and has solar, which is net metered, and grows a large percentage of food organically. That's wonderful as well. Yeah. For homeowners and community members that have that available to them, being able to put solar on your roof is always a pretty immediate, tangible solution that we talk about a lot. And then organic food is also really critical, whether you grow that or buy it locally or food waste is off definitely part of that solutions. Thank you for sharing. That's wonderful. It's really encouraging to hear what community members are already doing. Next question here. So our next question is, while we talk about all of these things that are great to do, and a lot of the opportunities there, of course, there are many barriers to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So we're asking, what barriers tend to you for your community from reducing greenhouse gas emissions? So maybe you're able to put solar on your roof, but maybe you lease or rent, and you're not able to. So that's a cost barrier. Maybe there's time barriers. So being able to walk to work or bike or bus to work is not an option, or maybe the commute is very long and you rely on your personal vehicle for time efficiency needs to get you where you need to go. Maybe there's lack of community organization, play, so you're not really able to or find a pathway to voice concerns and advocate for change. And also, we've already talked a little bit about waste recycling. So maybe you don't have access to recycling programs or recycling pickup at your house, or maybe composting programs are not available to you, which often has not been made very available statewide. So these are some things that often are strong barriers to people engaging in activities to reduce emissions. And then we also have a comment from our earlier question number 2, saying that we have some total electrification in daily life. So electric vehicles, solar, electric appliances for heating and cooling, which is big. And then we compost, collect all rainwater and grow our own food. Sounds like you guys are doing amazing things to reduce emissions. So we love to see that. That is, all of those are very tangible and immediate ways to contribute to yourself, making your home more energy efficient, but then also contributing to your community and reducing your emissions that way, which is wonderful. And then we have for barriers, often public awareness of problems and solutions. Much more education needed at all age levels and cost. Absolutely. Yes. I would second that as well. Public education and awareness is always really critical. It's always usually the first thing that needs to happen before any action is taken. And then also cost, because it's very not always accessible. Energy efficient alternatives or electric alternatives are not always cost effective for many community members. Also seeing a need for how electricity is generated with more wind, solar, and battery storage as well. We see a lack of public awareness that benefits of purchasing electric vehicles, so lack of monetary incentives and low interest to buy from local businesses and help build out charging infrastructure as well. Absolutely. Thank you so much for all of these comments. Feel free to drop in multiple as you please. But there are many barriers and many disadvantages. So continue to share those. And we'll be sure to address this as we can or read these out loud. We definitely see barriers, I would say, before we move on to the next question, barriers at all sort of phases and levels of implementation. So personal barriers is maybe cost or time, but we see statewide barriers as well. So the policy that might not be in place or looking at decision-making structures might not always be in place to support these initiatives or support these advancements or accelerate them in a fashion that we need them to be in, or time that we need to be them, have them produced in. So there's many different levels of barriers as well to this that might be outside of our immediate control. We see adoption of electric buses, response vehicles, and we see emission absolutely. TEQ has actually partnered doing really cool work with school bus electrification programs, which is really unique thing. I think a lot of these things that you talked about have been inputted here in this discussion so far. There have been really cool advancements in projects, maybe not by just by DEQ, but also by other state agencies to address these concerns, but also acknowledge that these concerns are still tangible for community members. And then also the electric vehicle of mid and lightweight vehicles, especially in the Richmond School District. And then we have a question here saying which barriers seem to be the hardest in reducing throughout communities, which is a good question. And I don't know if I'd be able to answer that fully because it's different for, it's different for every community. And I think when this question is, I will say, on our community survey as well. And the biggest thing I think that we've seen is always time and cost. And cost actually is probably at the top, which I think is reflective of what we've talked about. Electrification is costly, it's not accessible, it requires a lot of upfront investments, and you don't really see those benefits sometimes for a long time. And that's often a barrier for investment. And so that seems to be the hardest, both for individuals at the state level as well. Hopefully that answered your question. Then we also see legislative policy and standard operating procedure at the state and local level. Yeah, absolutely. Some more coordination there to get work done. Absolutely. All right. I think we spent, I'm not going to wear you guys out anymore with this question, so I think we'll move on. But thank you so much for all of your input. If you still have more thoughts on this, please continue, add them in the chat. As always, all right, so this is our biggest, I would say, the meat of why we're here tonight, what we're talking about, what we want to know from you, and this is what's going to really truly define the comprehensive climate action plan, are these emission reduction measures. So Ava covered the priority climate action plan emission reduction measures across all of those sectors that we went over. That will be referenced and expanded upon for the comprehensive climate action plan. And so we're asking tonight, what specific emission reduction measures do you wish were in place in your community or for DEQ to consider for the CCAP? So some examples might be implementing recycling and composting programs to reduce landfill waste, protecting and restoring green spaces and tree canopies in your community, improving energy efficiency of either residential or maybe commercial governmental buildings, expanding electric vehicle charging infrastructure, which I think we've heard about before earlier in this conversation, implementing solar on rooftops and parking garages and parking lots, as well as public spaces, and then even funding and supporting public transit. Transit is usually, I would say, a pretty dominant part of this conversation that we often have, but all of these are relevant and applicable. And so these are things that you hope to see. And that can be very personal to you, can be very micro and at the personal or community level, or things that you hope to see statewide. So statewide policy, statewide action or funding or incentives, things like that. Would like to see a continued shift toward renewable energy development. Absolutely. I will mention as well, maybe I'll defer to my colleague Julie here. She is also part of our renewable energy team. And maybe you would like to speak a little bit to some of the programs that are in place and data that's available there for renewable energy right now that DEQ is working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. Yeah, so within the state of Virginia, DEQ has the permit by rule process. So DEQ can permit utility scale renewable energy facilities. Now that goes for wind, that goes for energy storage, that goes for solar. And really what we see the most of is solar development. And so this isn't really with like rooftop solar or residential solar. These are more so going to be going through localities, depending on where you are, if there are any relevant permitting processes or any policies that you would have to be aware of. But speaking to what DEQ has seen in terms of utility scale, there's definitely been a massive growth of solar, especially in the past decade. And We do have some resources available for you on our website. One of our colleagues created the Renewable Energy Development Atlas, and basically that is a spatial tool that helps you identify where exactly utility scale projects are across the state. That maps our 2 wind projects as well as all of our solar projects. And I believe there's over 200 active permits for solar. Now, that issuing a permit for solar doesn't necessarily mean that a facility is actually generating solar energy at that time. But that means that they've received their permit to be able to construct. And oftentimes these facilities do take time to construct. But we have all of the information on our website in terms of the Renewable Energy Development Atlas. And I'm also going to drop a link in the chat to our renewable energy page underneath our programs. That's going to give you a brief overview of each renewable energy generation type, as well as any permits that have been issued by DEQ and the megawattage capacity for the cumulative total of those projects. And if there are any other specific questions related to solar or any other type of renewable energy generation, you just feel free to drop in the chat.
Thank you so much. I think I gave a little bit of an overview of what we're seeing with renewable energy trends across the state. We also have transitioning fossil fuel dependent operations to clean energy options, whether it's electric generation, transportation, or electrification of household appliances via building codes. Absolutely. And I'd like to see more public awareness programs to raise public knowledge, and also how electric vehicle owners can charge from home, as well as more publicly accessible charger stations. Yeah, absolutely. We've seen great work from VDOT, Virginia Department of Transportation, who has really strong work to expand electric vehicle infrastructure in rural areas in particular, but across the entire Commonwealth. Investing in those options. And VDOT is a strong partner for the CCAP. We rely on them for data and also so with them when we talk about things like workforce development, other data analyses, emission projections, and electric vehicles is always a really hot topic. And so they're very strong partners in development of this plan. I think as well, this is our last question, one of our last questions for today. So before we wrap up with this question, we do a lot more comments as well. So continue focus on the J40 initiative, Justice 40 initiatives, and underserved communities. And it's certainly a priority of the expanding our LIDAC engagement is looking at how to better support underserved communities, increasing options to engage in this accessibility. Yeah. I will also mention we are working with contractors or subcontractors with and during the development of this plan that are specifically focused on this, how to better target and reach those communities as well. So yeah, that is absolutely a priority. I appreciate your comment. I think as well, when we talk about emission protection measures, maybe we can give a little bit of an overview of some of the other work that DEQ is doing through the CRG process. We talked about it a little bit in our introduction from Mike about these implementation projects that we are developing or receive funding for. If we want to talk a little bit about what these funding pools are and the work that we're doing to reduce emissions across the Commonwealth in years. Funding. Sure, of course. Yes, we are very proud of our implementation grants. There were about 300 applications submitted from states, localities, municipalities, tribes, and territories, and only 25 were selected. And Virginia is very lucky to be a part of 2 of those. One of them is a 4-state coalition led by North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, and it includes North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland. And this is focused on protecting and restoring wetlands, coastal habitats, and forests. So under that grant, it's Virginia is actually getting about
50 million to DEQ that we are implementing projects through DWR, Port of Virginia, along Virginia's coast and inland forests. And the Nature Conservancy was also awarded $47 million under this grant for these same types of projects in Virginia specifically. So that one is about $97 million coming to Virginia. And our second grant is that was awarded is called Methane Reduction Projects in Virginia. And this is just Virginia, but it's a coalition between Virginia Department of Environmental Quality and Virginia Department of Energy. And the majority of this funding, about 80 million of it, is going towards Virginia, is being subawarded to the Virginia Department of Energy to implement coal mine methane capture and beneficial reuse projects in Southwest Virginia. The remaining 20 million is going towards landfill methane capture and beneficial reuse and food rescue and composting programs throughout Virginia. So yes, we are very proud of our implementation grants, and we will be working on them for 5 years. So you'll be hearing a lot more from us if you stay tuned to our Superior Chief reports.
Also, just wanted to make a quick note. I did just drop our frequently asked questions document in the chat. So that's going to give you a little bit more background about the CPRG program, how Virginia is involved. It'll differentiate a little bit between planning grants and implementation grants and give you a little bit more background on more about what those projects are going to entail.
For both of you to provide us that information. We did have another question here. Is there any funding or efforts to not just plant trees, but also save trees that are being strangled by vines, like the England ivy? Which is a very interesting question. I think when we talk about preserving or protecting and restoring green spaces, restoring them is one part of it, and protecting it is that second part that should not be left out of the conversation. I'm not aware of current funding efforts to save tree or tree restoration projects, but I'm sure we, if we want to provide your email information, and we can perhaps connect you to some of our land folks or other folks that we might know of that are doing this work. Perhaps the Department of Forestry might be more aware of this work that's being conducted. If it also, feel free to just, we'll direct you. I'd send this to the proper person who can better answer that for you. All right, I think we've covered this one quite a bit, so thank you all so much for providing your input on this question. We do have actually another reference to believe that with the trees. Yes, I agree with this. Planting trees is great, but it's not sustainable if each tree can even droughts get experience in recent summer. So yes, so looking at native species that can survive in our changing climate is really critical. So we do, I will mention we do have one more question. So this is our sort of wrap up question for you all tonight, but we are curious what is missing. So based on this conversation that we've had tonight, is there anything else that you'd like to know? So anything that we might have missed or maybe touched on but didn't expand upon, or if you have a lingering question from our inventory that we can answer for you, please drop that in and answer as best we can. Or is there anything else that you want DEQ to consider in CCAP? So this I'll touch on a little bit in terms of the development of the CCAP. There are many different parts to it. So we talked about the inventory and the projections, and Julie did a great job of covering the content there. But to recap, I also do a community analysis, so looking at benefits, workforce analysis, look at the benefits of reducing pollutants, so other air pollutants that might be reduced when we talk about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And then economic benefits or economic need funding sources, looking at those kinds of as well. So there's a lot that's going to be encompassed in this plan. So if there's anything else that you are curious about with any of that. So just a second here. You can always, after we get to this question, I'll share with you many different ways that you can continue to provide shares of input. Trust me, there are a lot. So if you think of something tonight before you go to bed and think, oh, I wish I would have asked you this question, don't worry, we will have ways that you can continue to provide your input. Council ABC making the decisions about permitting, investing in expansion, and new fossil fuel plans, projects in the state. Yes. Thank you for sharing that comment as well. We have a question here. What is the percentage between utility scale solar and distributed solar that are needed to meet goals?
Yeah, this is also, it's a great question. This is part of our analysis really is identifying what renewable energy sources in Virginia are most feasible, and also identifying what that looks like in the future. And while we can't always make these definite projections or identify specific percentages, the nexus of this question is something that we definitely want to look at as a group when we're looking at creating a representative plan, and a feasible one at that. So we'll definitely take note of this question. I don't have a finite answer for you right now, but that's a great question and we appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I don't think that there are numbers right now available, but perhaps there could be.
We'd like to take both, mix of both.
Okay. Will localities be aware of or assured that they may be eligible for the awarded grant funds?
So
Yeah, sorry.
I don't know if, correct me if anyone has a different answer or interpretation, but basically the grant process of like distribution by EPA has already come to an end. So there are planning grants and there are also implementation grants. And as Ava mentioned, there was a time frame in which EPA was accepting applications for specific projects with partners already identified, work plans already made. And so any locality or state or territory or tribal nation that had a specific project in mind that they basically had ready, other than having the funding, they had the opportunity to kind of pitch that to the Environmental Protection Agency. So that was the competitive part of the process. So that part of the process has already been complete. And in terms of the planning grants that were mentioned, so for example, How Plan RBA, Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and the Monacan Indian Nation, how they received planning grants was that it was a non-competitive process in which they were able to opt in. So DEQ as a state also opted in to that planning grant, which stays at the state level in order for us to conduct this engagement process and the planning processes that are going along with creating this plan for the next 25 years, and also the work that will be needed to revisit the plan in 2 years and see, give an update on what's been feasible, how people have responded and how industry has responded and how utilities have responded and LIDAC communities have responded. So really all of our planning work stays at the state level. If there were a smaller region that were to receive a planning grant, they would have received that directly from EPA as opposed to through us. There are specific projects within our methane grant that there will be an application process for, but that is not by a locality. That would be within a competitive process in which DEQ would basically lay out exactly what we're looking for in terms of applications, and various entities might create those partnerships and work on creating a work plan in the same way that EPA accepted proposals. DEQ will also be doing the same, but within the confines of that specific project.
Thank you so much for your comprehensive answer. How they distributed, yeah. So happy to award these funds, and we have these implementation projects as well. That will go through that in the process. But we'll look at, it'll be concentrated in those specific industries that they're targeting with production projects. And then I will mention as well, just with localities, DEQ has received input throughout the PCAP process to expand capacity for local governments to engage in climate action planning, and that's something that is, being developed and worked on within DEQ, and we, hope to support. There are many localities that have already extensive climate action plans or inventories, but others that do not. So targeting those that's of need that supported effort. So if you want to reach out more about that, please let me know. And you can always, or feel free to leave your email, or I could drop my. Our lights went out on us. We are usually not here this late in the office on a day. So thank you so much. All right. So yeah, that is my colleague noted that one. Our let's go off. It's an energy saving trick, which goes right into our final slide here. Well, not our final, but our next one for you. So when we talk about what can I do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, this is something that we talk a lot about many different things at the individual level, but then we also talk about these really heavy things at the state level or even the national level that are a lot harder and a lot larger challenges. So I always like to end with a little bit of climate optimism for you tonight. When we talk about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So some of these, we acknowledge that there are accessibility issues or financial, challenges to implementing these. But if you're looking for something to do, or maybe, empowered from this conversation and want to do more, these are some tips for you. So tips for homeowners, perhaps to conduct a home energy audit, increase the energy efficiency of your home, perhaps purchasing Energy Star certified appliances to see those cost benefits as well, or install a programmable thermostat, which you can also do as a renter. Renters, we do acknowledge, there are a little bit more barriers to increasing the energy efficiency of your home, but you can always change out your light bulbs or wash your clothes in cold or warm water instead of hot. These are very small things that you might see if you sense change on your electric bill each month, and you know that you're sort of doing your part to increase your energy efficiency and reduce your emissions. And then when we talk about transportation, we often acknowledge as well that transportation publicly is a barrier and not always available to community members, but if it is, feel free to use it, advocate for that, and advocate for those changes to occur in your community as well. And then we did a whole question right here. Yes, we will be sharing our slides out. So everybody who was registered, we have an email. We will send out this meeting form, the slides, and all the other resources that we've shared tonight. So you'll be sure to get all of that. All right, and then we're going to close up here, but we've talked a lot at you tonight, and we've asked for a lot of your input, but this is sort of the strongest point where you can contribute your insight into the climate action plan is through our community survey. So all of these questions that we asked you tonight are also replicated in the survey. So if you want to double your input, make sure that it's heard. Feel free to take this survey and share it widely with those who know. This will be closing in April right now. And so you can either go to that link that's dropped in the chat, or you can scan the QR code. And feel free, it should take about 10 or 15 minutes. We try not to worry about too many questions, but we will be reporting all of these responses and analyzing them. Plan. And then there's many ways to stay connected with us. We've talked a little bit about our bulletin. So we update this at least once a month, but with any relevant events that we have, our meetings, or engagements, other relevant CPRG information, that'll all be in our email. And you can subscribe to that through the link. We also have our DEQ webpage. So if you want some fun reading for tonight, feel free to go on our website. We have a lot of documents there and a lot of resources available for you to read about all of this work that we're doing for climate action planning. And we also have our email, which is right here, cprg@deq.virginia.gov. We monitor this email weekly or throughout the week, and we'll be sure to respond to you as best we can if you have specific questions or curious about different opportunities, want to talk to us more about any of these things we covered. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us. And then we have a post-meeting feedback form. This is our final stream of input for you. We have so many, but this is our final one. So if you want specific or to provide specific comment on what you heard tonight and what happened tonight and what went well, what didn't go well, what you think we need to improve on, please feel free to fill out this form. This will help us to continue improving our engagement strategy. I will briefly mention as well, so we have these virtual options for you, but we are also continuing our in-person engagements in a similar structure styles from tonight. So on Wednesday, we will be in Woodbridge at our Northern Regional Office from 6 to 8 p.m. and we will be hosting an in-person community meeting there. So please do come out if you're in that area or if you know of anybody that might be interested, feel free to share with your networks. We will also be in Salem on Wednesday, March 5th for 6 8 p.m. for same meeting. And then we're going to travel down to Abingdon on Thursday, March 6th for our final in-person community listening session of the spring so far that we have scheduled. So if those are anywhere near you and your neck of the woods, feel free to comment out and talk to us about this more and more and more. We'll always be happy to receive your input. I will open up the chat one more time just to make sure we don't have any lingering questions or comments. As mentioned, you will be receiving a follow-up email with all of this information we covered tonight. Just one more second here. But thank you so much, everybody, for attending, spending your evening with us on this Monday. This was a really fruitful discussion. I learned a lot, and I hope you guys did as well. And we hope to continue engaging with you in the future. Please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions. With that, I think we'll close it up for the night. We'll give you back a few minutes of your evening. Thank you all so much.